Welcome to Sleepless and st.canard, where nostalgia replaces REM cycles. I'm Kitty.
And I'm Ange.
We haven't slept
in 30 years.
This is a podcast about the 90s classic cartoon Darkwing Duck, and there is just something about this show. Even decades after its original airing, it still has people talking about it, connecting with its characters, its humor, and its heart. And in my personal experience, the show has a magnetic pull that draws in some of the finest, funniest, most talented, and hands down the loveliest people I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. One of which is obviously my co-host, Ange, but today we also have a guest.
Yay!
Darling of our hearts, Libri. Say hello to the people, Libri.
Aw, hi. Thank you for that very, very kind intro. I was not expecting that. How dare you?
Ha-ha! Gotcha. So yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Libri, about how you got into the show, your favorite character, and some other follow-up questions we'll get to after your initial rundown. Tell us how you found Darkwing Duck.
Sure. I think I've told this story to at least one of you before, but the story goes that one day I was doing homework as a child and flicking through Disney Channel because obviously you have to watch TV while doing your homework. That is the only way to do it. And I flicked past just a clip of some dog made of water being turned into a pudding. Like a powdered pudding mix was being poured on him and he was very upset. And for some reason, I couldn't find the channel again after that. And I never found that show again. I had no idea what it was called. I had no clues and I sort of forgot about it. And then many years later, I think I joined MySpace for, I don't know. And I saw a bunch of you guys playing very cool looking ducks and I went, oh, so what is this Darkwing Duck? Let me go to YouTube and find out more about it. And I started watching it from the beginning until I reached this specific episode, Just as Justice Ducks, where a dog made of water is having pudding mix poured on him and being very upset about it. And I just sort of stayed. I actually had to pause it and I went, wait, this is the show? And it was fantastic. It was love at first sight, but we missed each other like ships in the night and found each other again years later. It was wonderful. It
was destiny.
I also like that. Yes, I like that your explanation for joining MySpace was I don't know. I don't
remember.
Which I think is it was really the only appropriate way to remember joining MySpace. I don't know why I did that, but I did. Let's move on.
I genuinely don't remember why.
Is really Justice Duck's the only one who gets turned into pudding?
Yeah.
Yes, I remember because I watched it again. I watched half of it again this morning to just refresh my memory. And pudding is sort of the running joke of the episode because Morgana accidentally turns Darkwing into... Well, Gosselin asks Morgana if she can turn people into pudding, and she keeps suggesting it constantly throughout the episode.
And then Quackerjack takes a sample. Yes. Okay. So that's pretty funny, too, because Ange's near miss with reconnecting with the show as an older, Ange was almost buying the VHS of Justice Ducks. So you guys are Justice Ducks linked. That's really hard to say. Well, that's awesome. So we have, so now we have to ask some very hard-hitting questions. Who's your favorite character on the show?
I have given this some thought and I always come back to Megavolt because, I don't know, just his delivery, his voice actor's delivery, Dan Castellaneta, is just great. Whatever he says is hilarious all the time. He's just really having a lot of fun and he's a very creative character. I think the writers thought so as well because isn't Megavolt one of the most regularly occurring villains, if I'm not wrong? Of the Fearsome Four, anyway. I feel like I remember Megavolt showing up a lot.
He has the most episodes of any villain. I think he appears in 18 episodes.
There we go. Yeah, because usually his powers lead to so many interesting shenanigans, and I think in general he was just fun and easier to write for than the others, so they just kept putting him in. I love Megavolt. He's my favorite.
He's fantastic. We have our own classification system here, so I'm going to ask you to conform to our reality and give us some examples here of what is your god tier episode of the show.
So this is very blasphemous, but I haven't seen the full show in a very, very long time. So I don't remember all of the episodes, but one of my absolute favorite episodes. I love Justice Ducks. Let's be clear, that is actually my favorite episode. But the one I wanted to spotlight is an episode called Jailbird, I think. It's one where Darkwing tries to deliberately get himself arrested so that he can interrogate the Fearsome Four, and they immediately recognize him.
That was one of your picks, wasn't it, Ange, for team-ups?
Yeah, that was, I think, epic team-ups, whatever we called that category.
I think it's amazing team-ups or something, because that's the one where he teams up with the whole Fearsome
Yes.
Four. Also, Libri, can I just, just for 1 second? Ange.
Yep.
She hasn't watched all of Darkwing Duck. Why did you let her on the show?
I watched it. I just haven't watched it in a while.
No. It's okay. Ange, get out of here. What are you doing?
I am not leaving.
Okay, no, Jailbird is a really good one. 60% of Darkwing Duck is fine that you totally forget it.
But the reason it sticks in my memory is because it has my favorite Negaduck moment of the entire series, which is he tries to break into the prison as well, and he shoots a grappling hook or something up into a cliff face to climb up, and he says, "Negaduck crushes all obstacles," and then the rock smushes him and he goes, or vice versa.
I love that too.
Negaduck can overcome any security system, no matter how formidable. Negaduck crushes all obstacles. Or vice versa.
He's great. I can't wait until we get to watch an episode with him.
I feel like that episode is also a good example of how even he has a sense of humor, because a lot of people focus more on him being really serious and homicidal, but he gets those moments where he does something really stupid, like shooting a grappling hook into a boulder that proceeds to crush him, and then he...
Absolutely. Like, that's such the wonderful thing about Negaduck, right? Is that he's supposed to be this very dark character that everyone in the universe is kind of afraid of, but he is not immune to stupidity at all. And he's not immune to the same slapstick that Darkwing gets subjected to constantly, like anvils to the head and trucks to the face. And it's great.
He's very much involved in the cartoon logic of Darkwing Duck. It's not like he's, a Batman villain that's just scheming all the time. He is like, you know what I could do? I could dress up like a baby to get into this situation. Or wear a fake reporter's costume over my regular costume and be like, hey, I'm going to ask a terrible question. Okay, so then I have one last follow-up question for you, Libri. What episode do you think that you personally could just throw right in the dumpster?
So this was actually the hard one because, again, like, it's usually one of the episodes that you find kind of forgettable and you don't rewatch, so you don't remember very much of it. But there was one episode called UFO, I think, like where they just get kidnapped by aliens. And in premise, it's a nice idea because I always like when they spotlight that Launchpad being a nice person actually sort of saves the day. Like it leads to a lot of benefit or whatever. But I don't know, personally, something about that episode just really makes me uncomfortable, from the design of the aliens to the sound design to the whole like Darkwing's brain being put in a jar.
I was about to say,
body is just being shunted around and nobody notices. I don't know. It's just
he's just like a horrific brain creature with like two eyeballs like a snail.
Exactly, yes. And it was so upsetting because I was like, guys, you are literally Darkwing's family. And it's not like him being quiet is a normal thing. You should immediately have picked up something was wrong.
Yes, he's not talking about himself every 5 seconds. Are you dying? What's happening?
Exactly. It just felt like there was so much happening, but then Launchpad and Gosselin just seemed to not care. Like they were doing a completely separate story, and Darkwing was doing a separate story, and it just didn't work.
So there it is, right in the dumpster, alongside such classics as Slime Okay, You're Okay, and Getting Antsy. Ta-da! A dumpster. We're gonna need a bigger one. Oh, so I think you touched on it a little bit, but you came to us with a very intellectual take on the show as a whole, which you'll be sharing with us today. which is like the themes of the story and how. Well, why don't you talk about it? It's your scholarly essay that we will be grading you on, and we will be making macaroni portraits of what your score is. So I have my glitter at the ready, and you have 5 boxes of macaroni.
I have googly eyes.
Well, yeah, then we're set. Absolutely.
Wonderful. I already feel like I've been over talking in this podcast, but okay, sure.
No, that's how it's supposed to go, my friend. You're supposed to
talk on a podcast? My goodness.
I mean, we did try interpretive dance, but it didn't quite translate the first one.
Okay, so yeah, the thing I wanted to talk about was, Angie touched on that a little bit, and you did as well, the fact that despite Negaduck being a serious, dark character, he's still not immune to the slapstick cartoon logic of the universe. And I think the reason Darkwing Duck is such a niche property, because I've never met anyone who, in real life, who enjoys it or has heard of it. But the people who have seem to really, really, really like it. And I feel like the reason is because it's so niche, it occupies one very specific place and does it really well, which is this overlap between like the whole 90s Disney family values, slice of life vibe, along with taking all the action and creativity from superhero properties, but also what you guys mentioned, which was very Warner Brothers-y slapstick that Disney usually doesn't do, unless it's with Goofy or something like that. And it takes all of those and makes very much its own identity. It leaves all of the grittiness of the superhero comics behind. It leaves the slightly slow pacing and occasionally very like this overly squidgy feel that some of the softer Disney properties had. And it just took what was best about all of these things and made it into its very, very unique and different thing. I don't think I've actually seen a cartoon series quite like Darkwing Duck before, where it balances sometimes in like if you look at the Fearsome Four especially, their backstories for how they became villains are actually incredibly dark if you think too hard about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you had said that, it leaves a lot of the grittiness of, the Silver Age comics behind, but I don't think it really leaves it behind. It just kind of puts a clown nose on it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean. I mean, they don't harp on it. They don't make it the entire point. Like, again, like you said, like the Batman properties make it very much front and center. That is their selling point, to the point where someone like me might actually get emotionally fatigued by how dark and upset everything is all the time. Here, they have all of that potentially in the background, which is why I think it works so well for when you're an older fan, because you can stick to the more cartooniness, or you can definitely dive in deep to the much darker and much grimmer implications that are constantly simmering under the surface, which is great.
Yeah, because I mean, essentially Liquidator's origin story is the Joker getting pushed into a vat of acid, but it's I'm not too familiar with like what the canon Batman is. I'm mostly familiar with the movies, but like Darkwing pretty much literally creates the Liquidator, and it's just kind of like, oh, whoops.
Oh yeah,
and just goes on with his life. It's like, excuse me?
All the better. Cases are so much easier when the bad guy offs himself like that.
It's right. He makes a quip about it. Oh, good lord.
Oh god, I remember that. I'd repressed that memory. Thanks. But yeah, you see what I mean, right? Like, the implications don't really hit you until you're older and you go, oh my god, this show is actually kind of messed up.
Yeah. The episode that Ange and I had just recorded that was about Tad Stones' tweets, which you haven't heard yet, Zoe, but our listeners mostly probably will have. We talk a bit about Tad Stones going on about body counts, because I think Bushroot has the most on-screen murders.
Bushroot kills 2 people as soon as he turns into Bushroot.
He does. So that's just a testament to that. And I mean, I vowed when we watch the next episode and from there on out, to keep track of all the people that Darkwing kills, inadvertently or on purpose. So I don't think in the 2 episodes that we've watched, I don't think we've seen any on-screen murders. I guess to see just the death count of any character and who they're attributed to, and then we can update the Sleepless and st.canard site with, and these are how many people get murdered.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, but I still feel like what Darkwing Duck does is it takes a few things that really annoy me about superhero property. Like, there's some really annoying superhero tropes, and it doesn't do them, which makes me very happy. Like for one thing, like I mentioned, like not everyone's like gritty and depressing and crying on rooftops in the storm and the rain all the time. But also one thing that I really like is that if I'm not wrong, I think Goslin and Launchpad both know that he is Darkwing Duck. Instead of this whole stupid thing of like, the people that I care about most in the world can never know that I'm a superhero. Otherwise, it would be too easy for me to warn them if they become targets. It would be too easy for me to just like grab someone by the arm and say, hey, listen, a supervillain is coming after you, so you need to get into this bunker right now.
Because they both meet him as Darkwing, and then he assumes his civilian identity.
But I really like that, right? Because then you make the story of Darkwing trying to be the hero and fighting with his ego constantly part of his journey of trying to become a better dad for Goslin. Because usually what you see is that the whole superhero side of the story is so divorced from the personal development side of the story because they're not allowed to meet. And I think it was really nice to actually make this part of the whole thing. And therefore, Goslin actually gets to come on the adventures, and she's great. So, full marks on that decision.
And it's interesting, too, because, as much as they are aware of his secret identity, and they have no, with a few exceptions for Goslin, like, they don't have their own secret identities, that all of the villains are just constantly like, who are you?
That is very funny, especially when you consider, like, Launchpad and Goslin, since, again, they don't disguise themselves, they are still wandering around in the mornings. Are we saying that none of these villains ever notice that the little redhead girl who follows Darkwing Duck around all the time is the same kid that leaves, like, St. Canard secondary school or whatever every afternoon?
Andrew pointed out in the Slime Okay, You're Okay episode that Butcher is just like, what does he say?
He says something like, thanks for rescuing me, or thanks for helping me, whoever you are.
Whoever you are.
Whoever you are, to the little redheaded girl that has literally been around for every episode that he's been in. It's good stuff.
It's great. But yeah, so that was basically what I wanted to talk about. I think the writing and the thematic elements are really cleverly put together. And yeah, they work better in some episodes than others. Hashtag dumpster fire episodes. But it's really nice, and there's so much potential, especially for as the fan base gets older. I still see people writing, like, I don't know if they're still writing it, but I definitely see a lot of fan art, a lot of fan fiction, and a lot of it tends to skew more obviously in the more serious direction because you want to explore those themes. You sort of grow with the show, which is very cool. It's not something where like you look back on it and go, there's nothing that I can connect to in this anymore. Like for example, I think I've seen a lot of OCs on Tumblr for the Fearsome Four specifically, where people talk about, like, we actually get to see Megavolt in the show, right? He was in the same high school as Drake Mallard was. The reason he got his powers was because, right? If I'm not wrong?
I mean, yes, but it's one of those Tad Stones does what he wants because he's Tad Stones episodes where it's like, what's continuity?
So
that is one of the things, is Elmo's Butterspark.
Possibly, but I think that actually does remind you that before these guys became supervillains, they were just sort of guys. Like, Bushwood was just a guy, Megavolt was presumably just a guy. I don't know about Quackerjack. I assume he was just born with
Quackerjack was, I mean, like, he was the CEO of Quackerjack Toys, but then, like, went crazy, so he had to have at least had some business sense.
I've seen a bunch of OCs which I think are supposed to be, like, relatives or friends or loved ones of the Fearsome Four before they became the villains that they did. And, like, I think that's really fun. Like, you have that opportunity to explore these more angsty moments, or you can write a one-shot about Quackerjack and Megavolt just destroying the town and making puns and having a good time, because that is just as valid in the canon.
It's kind of a sandbox, because there is like the basic information about the characters, but there's so much left open that you can just kind of insert whatever you like into there.
And the tone is so open as well, right? That's why you can drag it a bit further down the line in any direction you want. You can make it more cartoony, you can make it more heartfelt, you can make it more serious. You can do whatever you want, and it still feels valid. It still fits the vibe, where I think there's a lot of properties where you can't really do that. There's a very, very specific vibe, and deviating from that will always feel a little bit weird. I don't feel that with Darkwing Duck.
Well, I'm going to send you a link to my grimdark Isis Vanderchill as the last woman left alive on Earth in the Arctic tundra AU, and you can let me know how that...
Sure, fantastic. Listen, this is a show where Bud Flood was thrown into a vat of chemicals and just liquefies, and it is just like an ordinary episode. I think you're good.
Okay, all right. Well, good. I'm going to go to Disney with it.
Isn't there an episode where Darkwing dies?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, he doesn't wear his motorcycle helmet. I think you guys might have mentioned this, but that is definitely a thing. He sees his own funeral. He sees his tiny adopted daughter wearing this adorable black dress and black shoes, being very, very upset. And this was apparently okay to air. So I don't think there's anything dark a fanfic writer can write that goes too far beyond what this show tried to do.
Well, I'm also going to write an AU where there are toilets in every bathroom.
Oh, no. You wouldn't.
Now you've gone too far.
I know, because they're coming for me.
You monster.
Michael Mouse is beating down my door right now. Remember me fondly.
But I was curious what your thoughts on the Ducktales reboot and what they did with the Darkwing Duck characters, if you felt that had the same magical elements and combination that you like.
I was supremely excited to hear that Darkwing Duck was coming back into the DuckTales reboot, and I did enjoy the episodes, but they very much felt like, I don't know how to explain it, but it felt more like a revival tour special or something, where it threw in a lot of stuff that fans were going to say, oh, I recognize that, that's amazing. But it felt more like a grab bag of references sometimes, rather than trying to make a cohesive story. I don't know. I understand that they only had a couple of episodes and they actually did have to focus more on the DuckTales thing. And I really liked the Jim Starling episode. I did really enjoy that. But I felt like their attempt to introduce all the other Darkwing Duck characters was kind of too much happening at once. Although I will say I at first was very weirded out by Bushroot's redesign. And then I think I realized that this is supposed to be a reference to the Husk Bushroot from Twin Peaks.
Yes.
Because I vividly remember being so disturbed by that. And I'm sure it's such a vivid, disturbing memory in everyone's minds that the reboot people were like, we have to put that in. That should be the first thing you see. I love the idea of Negaduck being this washed-up actor. I really enjoy the new Darkwing. I liked Goslin. I'm a bit weirded out by the decision of sending Goslin's grandfather away into a different universe rather than him just passing away like he did in the original show. Because that sort of seems to remove a lot of the emotional impact of Goslin actually truly being alone like she was in the beginning of the show. And I do find it, if I'm not wrong, does he actually adopt her in the reboot? I don't know if he officially does. And that also feels a bit weird to me. It just feels like they were focusing more on, hey, here are the cool like action scenes and here are cool creative characters. And they missed a few of those strong emotional touch points that the original series had that I was really hoping to see. I don't know.
I would agree. And I think that probably, like you said, it was probably because at the end of it, it is about DuckTales. So they probably were required. I don't really know how Disney higher-ups work with what they tell the storytellers, but I imagine that they probably were told that they had to include, Scrooge and the triplets probably in every single episode. So at the end of the day, it is a DuckTales show and not a Darkwing Duck show. So I think very much that's why, like what you said about it feeling more like a tour, because they're not really allowed not so much not they're not allowed, but I think they were limited, which is why it was a shame, or we don't know yet, but I suspect if they had done a Darkwing Duck reboot, like if the same DuckTales folks had been in charge of a Darkwing Duck reboot, hypothetically, I think we would probably see a lot of what you were hoping to see.
That does make sense, but then I feel like, of course, I don't want to tell the showrunners how to do their job or anything, but it feels like maybe they should have been a little less ambitious with the Darkwing episode, because there was the one where they have Taurus Bulba and like the Ramrod and Goslin and then all the villains and then Fowl, and then there was so much happening. And if you have to put the DuckTales stuff in the show, which you do have to, maybe it would have been better to narrow down the scope of what you're introducing. Because the reason the Jim Starling episode really worked, it had to share equal screen time with the DuckTales stuff. So the story was small and self-contained enough that it could work. But here it's like it was trying to fight for attention with the quote-unquote main characters of the series, which isn't really going to happen, and instead you end up with the equivalent of jingling the keys in the baby's face, where it's like really hectic and really shiny, and it's really nice, but then you sort of sit back at the end and say, wait, what?
Do you know how is it called Let's Get Dangerous? Is that the DuckTales 2017 episode? Do you know how that was supposed to end? Did you see that story? And
no. Wait, is this the Negaduck thing?
Yes. So a lot of the observations you've made are really interesting, because I think a lot of the reasons that Let's Get Dangerous has a lot going on is because it had a lot of rewrites to it. And you see that in the storyboards. From one of the storyboard artists put up the original storyboards on her portfolio. And in the original, Taurus Bulba was really not a big part of it. He shows up at the beginning, but I think at the halfway point of the episode, he gets arrested and they take him away. And he has an assistant named Kafka, who's obviously like a play on Clovis from the original. And she's been helping him out throughout the episode. And she starts up the ramrod, and it's the triplets and Scrooge that are like, what are you doing? And they confront her. And then she turns around and like unzips herself, and it's Negaduck on stilts. And he reveals himself as the actual main antagonist of the episode. And then he's the one that brings the Fearsome Four into the universe. It wasn't Taurus Bulba that was supposed to do that. So, but that's even more stuff. Like that's, like you're like what you're saying is it was already fighting and competing for like all this attention. They were going to have Negaduck in there too, and then that's ultimately why they took him out, because they're like, that's too much. Like we can't put all this stuff in. And when I spoke to Frank Angonis about it, he also told me that when Negaduck shows up, all the stuff with Goslin and the way in which she interacts with Launchpad and Darkwing, it almost doesn't happen. Like it's completely eclipsed by Negaduck, because you know Negaduck. If he's going to show up, he's going to steal the spotlight. He's just, that's just how he is in nature. So
I also love that the assistant's name was Kafka, because I'm choosing to believe that this is a reference because Franz Kafka wrote Metamorphosis, where the main character turns into a slimy, disgusting creature, and this assistant unzips herself to reveal a slimy, disgusting creature.
Yes, that was my thought too. I also like the mental image in my head of Negaduck in his natural habitat, where it's just him in the middle of a room with just spotlights on him.
Yeah. So that does sound like it would have been a lot more chaotic and busy. But then it's as you say, right? There was just so much, like, obviously we can't have Negaduck because that would have taken away from Goslin's emotional arc. But then the Fearsome Four are such an inherent part of, it's like Negaduck's thing, right? That's what they established in the beginning. Like, he's obsessed with his show. Those were characters on the show. It would make perfect sense for Negaduck to bring them through. So then why bring them through at all? Like, it felt like they were trying to put Darkly Dawns the Duck, Life the Negaverse and everything, and a couple of other very large-scale episodes from the original show, and squeeze it into a single episode's runtime.
I think it would have been beneficial if they were able to, if they had been given the opportunity to stretch that out across several different episodes as like a longer overarching arc. And
For sure.
and in an ideal world, I think it would have been cool if either they got a season 4 and that could have just been one of like the overarching stories of season 4 stretched out, or
That
it
would
would
have
have,
been very cool.
yeah, or if they announced like a reboot or a spin-off after that, and then like all that stuff just occurs over the time in like a completely different show.
Yeah, definitely. That would have been really good because then you would have had the time to actually establish stuff and explore character moments more deeply. I think that would have been very cool. Because then like you get to see the Fearsome Four, and I was very excited because like in the canon of the DuckTales reboot, they were just supposed to be actors, but now you've summoned 4 actual supervillains from an alternate universe. And that immediately makes the audience go like, what the hell kind of universe is this where they've come from? Like, is there a Darkwing there? Is there a Goslin and a Launchpad there? What is that going on? But then they get brought and then they get sent almost immediately. And it feels like such a waste of a moment.
Yeah, it was just there to happen and didn't really have any weight to the overarching plot of it. But yeah, I feel like like Andrew was saying, like I think we were at that point not aware that the show was going to be ending. So that felt like this was going to be the kickoff point for a Darkwing Duck spin-off show, which I think is probably what the showrunners were hoping for, which didn't pan out. So I feel like it's more of a love letter to what could have been versus what we got ultimately.
True. And don't get me wrong, I really did enjoy the episodes. As a Darkwing Duck fan, it felt like it was something that was made specifically for me. But it does feel like it's going to, if the idea was to drum up interest in Darkwing Duck again, it did feel like that episode was going to lose a bunch of people in an attempt to put in too much at once.
There was a lot of Easter eggs in that episode too that I enjoyed. Like there was, I think it was Launchpad had villain cards that were of the Darkwing Duck villains, and they were actually the cards that would come with the VHSs. Like they had like a lime green border and like, you know, the art on it and everything. I was like, oh,
Really?
I have some of those.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so there was lots of neat stuff like that. So that's why it felt more just like, I felt like that was Frank whispering into the mic, I love you, Darkwing Duck.
I will say the choice to make Launchpad a huge Darkwing Duck fan was a masterful decision. I love that decision. The fact that he carries VHS tapes and an old TV in his plane and forces people to watch Darkwing Duck was very uncomfortably real, and I felt personally attacked.
Yeah. How dare they call us out like this?
It was actually really, really nice to have. Like, the whole idea of Darkwing Duck was a show that inspired the current Darkwing Duck and inspired Launchpad to become his assistant is such a lovely idea and such a beautiful way to write a love letter to the fans, as well as trying to take the story forward. I love it. It's really clever.
So now I have to ask, with all that in mind, what would you consider to be the perfect setup for a Darkwing Duck reboot? Like, what would you love to see in a reboot in terms of storytelling elements?
Seth Rogen, take notes.
Oh God, I don't know actually. I think it would be actually really nice if we not do what the original show did and keep putting those, those one-shot villains that just arrived and were a little bit irritating and then left. I'm speaking specifically of things like Jambalaya Jig and Lilliput. I think it would be actually really nice if we stuck with the Fearsome Five and a few others as the quote-unquote main villains and have more episodes that explore them and explore more of the world. I definitely think we can look more into Goslin for a Darkwing Duck reboot. That would be really nice because it's so difficult to find a child character that's genuinely engaging and fun and not annoying all the time. And Goslin was one of those characters. And it would be wonderful to see her taking a more active part in the show, if that makes sense. Because there were some episodes where I felt like the writers would just forget Goslin existed, which is a shame because she's such a lovely character. I don't know, I think I love the idea of like, I definitely want to see Jim Starling as insane sewer-dwelling Negaduck meeting, like attempting to recreate the Fearsome Five. That's what I want to see. I want to see like a 2-episode thing or even like a 3-episode thing of Negaduck so deep in his show delusion that he tries to track down the original actors and try to convince them to dress up as the Fearsome Four and be like his villain squad.
We're getting the band back together.
Yeah, I think it would be like incredibly funny, but also very poignant because of the whole like, like trying to recapture his lost glory and no one's really like buying into what he's selling. And maybe like he tries to get a younger group of people in on the whole scheme. Maybe he even actually meets the alternate universe actual supervillains through some universe shenanigans, which would be very cool. I just love the idea of the fiction of the show bleeding into reality so heavily. I would love to see that more explored, because then you can also explore the current Drake Mallard's relationship with his heroes and with the show that inspired him and the characters that he recognizes. I think that would be very cool.
And same question. What would you think would be
a and then we'll come to
Darkwing Duck reboot?
Oh gosh. I mean, I would rename it to Negaduck. And it would be about his adventures in the Negaverse. I'm joking. I swear I'm not that much of a delusional fan. Oh my god.
But that's so funny though, because I was thinking that too, because when Libri was talking about him meeting up with the actors and everything, it's like, how did Negaduck find the normal verse or the show verse? Like, I want to know that episode. Like, he got to a certain point in the Negaverse and was just kind of like, what's this cake?
Oh yeah, we never learned how he crossed over.
So anyway, continue, Ange. Negaduck, the animated series.
Realistically, a lot of the stuff that we've done in the Duckverse RP and the way we've set up the universe with that mixture of humor, and it has that gallows humor combined with that just fun, hilarious, ridiculous shenanigans that all the characters get into. That's the kind of thing I would love to recapture in an actual series and have all these characters come in, and more neutral characters that aren't necessarily solid good guys and bad guys, having those in-between characters that, help out in some way or form, or like they own properties in the city that are seen repeatedly in episodes and that come up over and over again and have some kind of fun theme. Like, I'm thinking about like Lily and like the bookstore and how it draws in supervillains and good guys. Like, I would love to see stuff like that in a cartoon.
And for our listeners unaware, Lily is Libri's Duckverse OC, who is a sweetheart who runs a bookshop that just happens to be frequented by basically every evil person in the world, and they leave with hugs and like muffins.
It's so funny. She keeps trying to offer them coffee, and they're always very confused. But yeah, that's a lovely idea. The idea of having more concrete locations. That was never really in the original show, obviously, because it was more like the villain of the week or the adventure of the week. But having actual world building and concrete locations and characters that you keep coming back to, that would be lovely. It's lovely.
You mean continuity?
Yes. No, we can still have the weird alternate universe episodes because those are always fun, like where everyone is suddenly a pirate. But a little continuity would be nice. I also got super distracted because while Angie was talking, when she said what she did, I immediately started imagining our Duckverse RPs as an actual official animated show. And I just went off into La La Land for a minute there.
Dreaming the ultimate dream. Well, if I was in charge of a Darkwing Duck reboot, I would make it out of sock puppets, and it would be called Oops All Socks.
Right. So what you mean is you want the Muppets to perform Darkwing Duck.
Absolutely. And there would be nothing but duck people with human ears and human feet. And
oh no!
Herb Muddlefoot would be the main character, and it would just be a slice of life. There was, I feel like every episode I just start airing my dirty laundry of all the other things that I like. But the think it was 2002 Tick show, The Tick, where it was the superheroes, but you never really got to see them do superhero stuff. It was just kind of like them hanging out in a diner and like living their lives. Like, I feel like that could be fun. I would probably be the only person who would like that, like watching like Negaduck come rolling in covered in slime with 5 Dobermans chewing on a bomb and being like, I'll take your hottest beignet.
Are you suggesting a coffee shop AU?
And they were roommates.
Oh my god, they were roommates. But I think
I'm not seriously suggesting any of these things, but I do like to see. That's, I think, for me, that's my favorite bit, is seeing because you know how big and loud and everybody is when they're in their in their element, and I'm a supervillain, but like Megavolt having a podium in his apartment for him talking to the like, I love like the domestic stupid things that don't make sense. Like, I love those little asides. And, Quacker Jack with all his little toys and talking to them. And, like, his whole personal relationship with Mr. Banana Brain and all that kind of stuff. I love seeing that. So
Absolutely.
I feel like mostly, like, the superhero movies these days, I feel like some of the shows have gotten better at this, is having those moments. Because the movies always try to be big and loud and exciting, where you don't really get the connection with the characters and get to understand who they are on like a more personal level, even if they are just deranged and crazy. So that's what I like. That's what I like to see. I love.
This is something they do touch on occasionally in the show, not enough to my liking, because I love seeing the villains just living their ordinary lives between schemes. But I watched Jailbird this morning to remind myself that was the episode with the quote, and it's so cute because you finally get to see the maximum security supervillain prison from the inside. And from everything I had seen on like TV and movies, you're kind of expecting like these cells with cages or like glass doors or whatever, like like what you'd see in Arkham and whatever. And instead you just see Megavolt hanging very sadly in the middle of a garden and scaring birds away with his electricity powers. And there seems to be no one's forcing him to do it. Someone just told him to go and scare the birds away. He's doing it. Bushroot is gardening. And Quackerjack is rolling around in the grass having an amazing time. And no one is forcing them to do these incredibly menial activities. They just do them because there's nothing else to do.
They're just so bored.
It's so funny. I love that so much. Like, this is the maximum security supervillain prison. And there's only the 4 of them. There's the scene where, like, they're all sitting at a table and then the camera pans to show us Darkwing being brought in, and it's an incredibly long lunch hall. And there is nobody else in this entire prison.
That's great.
It's so funny because this implies that either these 4 are really the most dangerous supervillains in St. Canard, or they're the only 4 who get caught.
Both are beautiful implications.
So funny. I also, one of my favorite things, again, like we're talking about like mixing dark stuff with funny stuff so much, and Negaduck is the perfect example where he keeps getting like pasted with slapstick comedy when he's trying to be incredibly serious. But the fact that he is never public enemy number 1 in the show, the running joke that he's always number 2 and Dr. Slug is number 1, we don't know who this guy is. I don't think we ever actually see him. He is
we
the
do.
greatest
We do. In one episode, he's a throwaway. Is it Comic Book Capers?
I think it's Comic Book Capers at the beginning. It's like a fake introduction where I don't know oh no, it might not be Comic Book Capers. It might be Inside Binky's Brain, but it's the opening of it, and essentially they're about to get smashed by Dr. Slug, and then Darkwing breaks the 4th wall and pauses it, and he's like, I think this is a good time to tell a story.
Yeah. Yes. And then it just sidetracks. But he's literally just like a slimy green thing with one of those little, you know what?
Those doctor things.
I don't know what it is. But like the little like circle things on a band that they used to wear on their heads. Was it just like a lamp? Like, what is that?
A miner's helmet, you mean?
No, he's a doctor.
Oh, one of those things. I don't know what those
I know
are
what you're
called.
talking about, and I'm gonna Google it.
Please do.
So am
Dr. Google, tell us what's happening in your practice.
Dr. Head
Circle thing on Doctor's. Oh, it filled it in for me.
It's just called a head mirror.
A head mirror.
Amazing. Oh, because he's a dog. That's so fun. But yeah, like my favorite thing about Negaduck is that in universe, everyone takes him incredibly seriously because he is scary. Like he has a chainsaw. He has threatened a child with a blowtorch. I remember this very clearly. But the writers of the show don't take him seriously. And it's such a funny, what would you call it? Like where these two worlds collide is where some of the best writing happens. Where like he is very much this dangerous, serious, dark and gritty villain, but then the writers just put him through so much stupidity and so much grief where like he's never going to be public enemy number one and stuff like that. It's so good.
But he also has fun with it too, because he's definitely the one holding the anvil like over Darkwing's head as he
for sure.
like trampolining up into it.
For sure. I think Darkwing flipped the script on him once, right? I vividly remember there's a clip of him bouncing up to a story window of a building, and Darkwing like holds a frying pan and then an anvil and then a safe and then brings a garbage truck to catch him and then backs out of the way. So he slams into the concrete instead and he just goes, whoops.
That's Justice Ducks, the ending.
That one, yes. So good.
So maybe that, yeah, I could see that. I had the roles swapped. But yeah, Darkwing, see that? That would probably count as a death on Darkwing's conscience. But
I mean, I don't think Negaduck can actually die.
He's too full of spite and slime to die.
Exactly.
Just like Bushroot. He will always be crawling out of sewers.
Bushroot and the Liquidator are functionally immortal, aren't they?
Yes.
I mean, the Liquidator especially, because you see him frozen and evaporated and God knows what so many times, and he's just perfectly fine.
He's always got a new pitch for you.
I think one of you told me this, but wasn't the Liquidator one of the hardest villains to write because of his shtick? And that's why he doesn't show up in as many episodes?
I've heard that. I can't confirm for sure. Like, I don't know if that was just fan speculation or if who worked on the episode said that, but it would make sense.
God bless who did write for him, because everything he says is gold.
Yeah, his dialogues are actually really fun.
I feel like that's, I think, why people like the Four so much and Negaduck is because their writing is typically super strong, where I don't feel like that carries over very well for some of the B, C, D list villains for the show.
Oh, I will say, if as talking of things that we'd want to see in a Darkwing Duck reboot, it would be really nice to have more female characters taking on a more major role. Like, Morgana and Binky are the only ones that I really remember from the original show. I mean, Goslin as well, of course. But I think it's just those three. And then Binky is just sort of like a side character. She's not really, like, involved. And how
dare you?
No, she's not involved in the superhero stuff. She would love to be.
She is the Canardian Guardian.
Canardian Guardian, yeah.
Excuse you?
What I mean is that we saw a lot of female one-shot villains, and some of them were actually super interesting, like Camille Chameleon and Splatter Phoenix had a lot of storytelling potential. Like, where does she get magic paint from? Was Camille always like this? But then they only show up for one episode or maybe two at most, and then they're never mentioned again. And there's a couple of other female villains who just sort of arrive and then leave. I think it would be really nice to have a couple of more recurring female villains to just show up every now and again.
Preach!
Amen. We all want that Bianca Beakley spin-off show. No, I didn't like her. She was the Bugmaster. The Bugmaster.
Female villains that were introduced that I liked were Camille and Splatter. I'm not counting Morgana because she's a hero now. She doesn't count as a villain.
And I gotta say, as an adult now, what is a more enticing reason to start doing a life of crime than paying off your student loans?
Yeah. That was the funniest justification, and it immediately made her one of my favorite characters when she said that. It's like, yes.
Yeah, well, same girl. Same.
Still relevant 30 years later. But yeah, no, that was actually, like, I love Darkwing. It is my all-time favorite cartoon, as much as anyone who's probably listened to this podcast up to this point might think otherwise, because we've always ended up listening to episodes that aren't the best, in my opinion. But the big thing that I always took issue with was that the female characters didn't get as much love. I don't think that was intentional, but they just didn't get the same kind of development, and as a result, they just weren't as impactful. And I would have loved to see far more female villains that were more involved and had a greater part in the story. And that's basically what ended up being my motivation for my own characters and for wanting to create characters and get into the fandom, was that I wanted to see more of that.
Yeah, because there aren't really any female characters in the show, villains specifically, that can go toe-to-toe with the big boys. That can hold their own. We don't really get to see them in that kind of dynamic. I think maybe the one exception to that is Ammonia Pine, when she and Steelbeaker, going head-to-head.
Oh,
and we only really
Ammonia.
see her a couple times, but...
I just want more hot, evil women, okay? I do. I want to see hot, evil women doing evil things, and we didn't get enough of that. Because Morgana reformed, unfortunately. Although, not unfortunately, like, I'm glad she did eventually, but I would have loved to see that dragged out a bit more.
Especially for a show that had 91 episodes, they could have, made that a more, and they could have made it a more coherent experience by putting those episodes in any kind of order that made sense. But splitting hairs. Give us the evil hot ladies, damn it.
I'm now just imagining like villain Morgana and Camille and Splatter Phoenix and the Bugmaster and Ammonia Pine all having like a girls' night out while they sack the town and rob and cause mayhem. And it's their villain girls' night out. And Darkwing doesn't really know how to deal with it.
I feel like with the villains in that show too, they are so diverse in their motivations and like what they're after, that could have been a girls' night out episode, because they would all be trying to steal different things. Like, maybe, everybody wants the money, but they'd all be after different things, which I think is what makes the Fearsome Five work so well, is that, Megavolt is only interested in, stealing light bulbs, and, who knows what Budflood is after half the time, but he likes to drown people. I guess. I don't know where I'm going with this. But yeah, no, it just seems like there's an interesting dynamic that they get to play with that we don't get to see really in any of the other villains in the show.
Absolutely.
There's really nobody who has their own running crew except for Tuscarnini and his penguins. Oh, and Taurus Bulba, I guess. And his cronies Hammerhead, Hannigan, and Hoof and Mouth.
Hoof and Mouth, yeah. We never saw them again, even though they were quite entertaining. I feel like the original show has this habit of introducing quite potentially interesting characters and then going, you know what? No, I'm bored. Let's go back to the status quo.
Yeah, I mean, even Taurus Bulba, he was interesting too, and he was in 2 episodes. I mean, yeah, I guess 3 technically if you count the parts 1 and 2 of Darkly Dawns, aka the launch pad as a pilot episode.
I would argue that his interest and his impact does come from the fact that he's really only in those 2. I feel like showing him too much.
He's in the Storminator too. The Storminator, where he's
and he's
cyborg.
Weirdly not as threatening in the Storminator as he was in Darkly Dawn's the Duck. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think probably because he's pitted against the kids in that one.
Yeah, okay, that does make sense.
He takes Honker and Goslin, and Darkwing is trying to find them. He's in a wheelchair in that episode? Am I remembering that right?
Darkwing? Yeah, he broke his leg or something, right? I think so. Something happened, and I remember Launchpad having to schlep him around with the wheelchair. Actually, that's interesting. There's been a couple of episodes where Darkwing has sort of just... Like, there's one episode where he had his leg broken. Isn't there one episode where he's temporarily blinded for the duration of the entire episode? There's been a couple of episodes like that, where he just stubbornly insists that he can absolutely handle this, no problem, with absolutely no recovery time, and then completely fails.
The hubris of Duck.
There's also several episodes where he quits crime fighting forever, never again, very dramatically.
Oh, yeah. Doesn't he do that in Justice Duck?
He kind of has a pity party in Justice Ducks. He's just like, I'm garbage, I'm trash, I'm lower than low, and then Launchpad's like, you're not a slug, or some kind of joke like that.
I am the self-centered boob who hands over the city at the drop of a dime. I'm a gipnoid, a slug, a spud mother and jackanape.
Oh, come on. You're not a slug.
Do you guys remember, I don't know if this was strictly an American thing, that there was a after-school special that was animated called, I'm going to Google it because the name is ridiculous. It's called Cartoon All-Stars to the Rescue. And it was like all the 90s cartoons at the time. It's like an hour-long Don't Do Drugs PSA.
I have never heard of this in my life.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, you know what, Darkwing might not be in it, but I'm pretty sure the Ducktales crew is in it, like the nephews, and I definitely know that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in it, and there's like one scene where they're like showing the kids what it's like to be on drugs, and it's just like a nightmare fuel roller coaster.
I am looking at the cover, and I cannot explain the experience I am feeling right now. To see like Huey, Dewey, and Louie, Gonzo, Winnie the Pooh, Alvin and the Chipmunks, Garfield, Alf, and Donald and Bugs, and Slimer and the Smurfs all in one place.
Yeah.
And the Muppet Babies. I've never even heard of this. What is this?
I think you have to come back for another podcast episode, and we have to watch this with you.
I think we do have to watch this.
Oh, you've seen it, Ange?
Yeah, I saw it a long time ago. It was very special, something very unique. I will reserve my commentary for when we watch this all together.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. It came out in 1990, so Darkwing is probably not in it. I kind of remembered that he was, though, but that could just be me trying to lump everything I've ever loved into a terrible PSA.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are in this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty sure one of them rides the roller coaster with the kid. But yeah, so that's that's what I feel like a lot of 90s shows did, where they had these morals they had to cram in there. And I guess they're still in modern day cartoons, but they have more finesse. They're not as heavy-handed as they used to be back in ye old days, where it's just like, this is an episode about why you should wear a helmet when you're on your bike.
Does anyone remember Captain Planet's episode about drugs? That is the one Captain Planet episode that is still vividly burnt into my mind.
I do not recall that episode now.
There is a shady man in an alleyway, full on trench coat, hat, slightly creepy voice, selling these slightly glowing bills to students. And I still remember there's this scene of this kid who takes some, and then the next time you see him, he's completely like gaunt and his cheeks are sunken in and he looks horrifying, and he's on his knees grabbing this guy's coat, begging him for more of whatever those pills were, and he won't give them to him. And then it turned out for some reason that was bad enough, but then for some reason the drug dealer was a rat. Like he was just like a fully human-sized rat with like long sharp nails and a huge rat tail. And I remember even as a kid watching this and going, I was along with the story and I was actually pretty scared about this whole drugs thing. But what does him being a rat have to do with anything? I am now so distracted by this giant rat that I've completely forgotten about the lesson of the episode.
So you could suspend your disbelief up until the rat, and then you were like, no, I'm sorry, I'm going to do every drug.
I don't know why. It was so weird. It wasn't the weirdest thing Captain Planet had done, but it just, the reveal that he was a rat was so out of nowhere.
Oh, don't do drugs, kids. You got any more talking points for us, Ange?
No, I think we've covered a lot, actually, and it was a good conversation, I must say.
I should also like to point out that I did a quick Google, and the rat's name was Verminous Scum.
I feel like that's something that they were really good at. Well, I guess they still, folks are still really good at coming up with names for supervillains and bad guys like that. Like, we talked about Duck Night Rises from Ducktales 2017, and there's just one little throwaway thing where Drake and Launchpad are playing with their Darkwing Duck action figures, and Launchpad has called Hot Couture.
Yes!
And it's like a flame villain. And I was like, that is so clever!
I'm setting the
That
fashion
was-
world on fire.
That was really funny.
I love it. I love clever villain names. So yeah, okay, so this was fun. Thanks for joining us, Libri. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you for having me. I had a lovely time. Thank you so much.
We are going to have
Yeah.
you back, and we will watch Cartoon All-Stars to the rescue and get your deep, important, very poignant thoughts on this storytelling.
Take notes on what parts of the episode it was clear that the animators were on drugs themselves, and and it will be a time. But yeah, I think that about wraps it up for us today. Do we have any parting words of wisdom for the people?
Watch Darkwing Duck if you haven't.
Don't do drugs, kids.
Do the drugs that are not going to scramble your brains, kids. And remember that crime doesn't sleep, and neither do we. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Farewell.